Does that mean we don't have that capacity to ensure that those products that don't meet our standards don't come into the country? I mean, within the country here.
It entails a lot of monitoring, because those products that come in, you cannot rule out the fact that they are smuggled in at some point or the other. And that is why you find NAFDAC being present at every port and border post, where we also use cutting-edge technologies to also try to determine the status of those products. We use the TrueScan, we use the mobile authentication service, and that is not a one solution that fits all. We're also looking at other solutions like the GS1, which involves the track and tracing.
Is NAFDAC overwhelmed?
We're not overwhelmed, but we need more staff. There's a lot of work to be done. And remember, we're covering the health of 180 million Nigerians. And the workforce is about just a little over 2,000.
So 2,000 staff monitoring the health,
surveillance, yes,
surveilling things that affect 180 million. Now, let's pull back a bit. You talked about the laboratories. NAFDAC depends solely on the laboratories for work. You have set up laboratories within country and outside the country.
Yes.
Let's look at the laboratories outside the country.
Yes.
Who runs them?
The quality control analysts in that country.
In that country? In that country. Employed by NAFDAC? Employed
by NAFDAC. There's an MOU between us and the quality control analyst to ensure that they meet up with a checklist of a lab that can test NAFDAC regulated products.
Okay, is it the quality control analyst that gets the lab, or NAFDAC gets the lab?
The lab is owned by the quality control analyst, and NAFDAC inspects the laboratory facilities to conform with what we have in Nigeria.
But NAFDAC is not there when the analyst is inspecting those goods or testing them?
NAFDAC is not there.
So is that not room for compromise?
No, there's no room, because there's a checklist. There's a checklist in place. It's based on trust. And of course, that quality control analyst must have been seen as working for the Chinese government before we can engage into an MOU with that particular quality control analyst. It's also working for the government. There's one that we're going to inspect next week. And the very first thing I did was to check. This lab has working relationship with SGS, has working relationship even with China Food and Drug Administration. So these are the things that we look into. We have our checklist.
Speaking about labs, I see someone talking here about, says that there are substandard labs for testing agricultural products in Nigeria, and it forces those who are exporting these products to go to neighboring Ghana for testing. Is that correct?
That's not so. Agricultural products, you see, anything that borders on food and drug comes down to NAFDAC. And NAFDAC, actually, our role is confined to semi-processed and fully processed products. For agric produce, that is entirely the purview of the Ministry of Agric. But when it comes to the pesticide residue, it comes to NAFDAC. And having realized that the issue of food is all encompassing, NAFDAC has now put in place a holistic approach of starting from the onset to the final product, therefore bringing about collaboration even between us and the Ministry of Agric that deals with agricultural produce, from farm to table, from farm to fork. So we have our veterinary medicines and applied products directorate that deals with vet medicine and agrochemicals, and what we do is collaborate with Ministry of Agric to ensure that even the farmers, right from the time that they go into planting, there is a due process that is followed even in the application of the chemicals, the fertilizers that they use, which it requires a lot of training. And when these produce come out, they are stored in a silo. What is the temperature in that silo? Are you maintaining all the checklist for good storage facility.
So, if I may come in, do you check the pesticides and fertilizers that the farmers use?
Yes, we do. We do.
How effective is that check? Because a lot of them are still coming from China. How effective is the check you do on the pesticides and fertilizers that are used?
It's effective because when this, for instance, the urea formaldehyde, which is the urea formaldehyde, our checks entail quite a number of activities. It is not limited to us. We also have input from the National Security Agency, the NSA, that for you to bring in that particular fertilizer, there has to be a permit from the NSA. NAFDAC also will issue a permit. We have the Chemical Evaluation and Research Directorate that goes to all the facilities that bring in these chemicals.
Ms. Oni, I'm sorry, but you've talked about quite a number of directorates. And, yes. And I asked you again, all these directorates, 2,000 staff all together in different directorates, and the amount of pesticides, amount of fertilizers that come into the country, amount of processed goods that have to pass through NAFDAC are quite enormous. I mean, we have industries, small industries, large industries across the country. And you say NAFDAC is not overwhelmed?
We're not overwhelmed. With 2,000 workforce, we can still do more. We're looking into that. With 2,000 workforce, we have put in place e-registration, e-clearance, electronic.
Do you do e-checking, e-testing?
Yes, we don't do e-testing. When we do some form of e-testing through the mobile labs that we have, that we carry about when we are doing our post-market and pharmacovigilance surveillance activities.
Let me bring this in because my colleague will come in soon, but the House of Reps, the Joint Committee on Health Services, Drugs and Narcotics, some time ago held this one-day investigative hearing into what they say importation of fake, substandard and cancer-causing tomato paste in the country, and they said they were going to go ahead and do some further work. And we had several of these companies, I think 3 of them did appear, and all of them were talking about the fact that NAFDAC is not doing enough to stop those products from coming into the country. What's going on?
I beg to disagree that NAFDAC is not doing enough. First, we don't want a situation whereby we create unnecessary scarcity in the country because quite a number of, if not all homes, make use of tomato paste. And so we encourage also for some of this tomato paste to be imported into the country. And when the tomato paste come into the country, like you rightly said, we have our laboratories there to test the quality of the tomato paste. We have engaged in quite a number of laboratory analysis on the tomato paste coming in, and we have engaged with all the stakeholders that bring in the tomato paste. The first round of the result was shared with the stakeholders, which has necessitated the next round of analysis as a confirmatory tests on the tomato paste. We developed a protocol, and the meeting ended last week. And this week, market sampling of the tomato paste we identified about 2 markets, 2 states in each zone for this sampling to take place, which has started this week. Okay. And in 2 weeks, the results on this tomato paste will come out, and we'll discuss with the public on the situation.
Let's get a question. Mark.
Well, Mrs. Oni, it is, your passion is very palpable. You are very excited about some of the things that you're doing, especially as regards importation. First of all, people will question, how long does this process take? Or this, e-verification system, how long will it take? Perhaps we should start from there.
Thank you very much. For the e-clearance, there's the federal government policy that states that within 48 hours, just to facilitate trade, your goods must be out of the ports. And we have keyed into that. We're doing that very regularly. And once we look through, the e-clearance of NAFDAC is connected to the platform of the customs for us to be able to ensure that goods come out quickly from the ports. And once they come out, with all of this in place, if you have your CRIA already attached to it, it says something to us that the first line check has taken place. So we can do random of sampling to go to the lab and do a double check of that. Because you have your CRIA already attached, it helps your trade process with the agency. We also have the e-reg. E-reg, where you sit, e-registration, where you sit in the comfort of your zone. It's an e-platform, and you can key in all your information there without necessarily coming to NAFDAC. And the only time you now come into NAFDAC is perhaps when you are submitting the hard copy, just to make assurance doubly sure. So the E is to fast track processes of registration and clearance, and we have put that in place. Oh.